Welcome everyone to episode 17 in our What If interview series, where we discuss and share knowledge on customer experience, digital transformation, and how to better serve customers via digital channels. My name's Luke Stamper, and I'm a content marketing executive for Mando. We are a digital agency committed to simplifying digital experiences for everyone. We work within regulated industries with energy, utilities, and financial services companies, focusing on helping your customers to do those tasks they don't really want to do. So we don't really all wake up on a Saturday morning excited about paying our water bill or submitting an insurance claim. We make those experiences easier, giving time back to customers to do more exciting things. So today is the title of our webinar is What If Digital Could Help You Get to Net Zero by 2030? We welcome our guest, experienced senior account executive for Microsoft, Danny Lara. Danny is currently operating within utilities and energy, with a strong focus on helping her clients to become more sustainable businesses. Before we get started, I just want to let you all know that we have my Mando colleague Sarah also on the call. Sarah will be helping with logistics and monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions or comments throughout the course of the conversation, please be sure to send them in and Sarah will ask them at the end. We'll be chatting for around 20 minutes-ish. So if you have any questions, as I said, just pop them in. So without further ado, I'll welcome you, Danny. Please, could you just introduce yourself and give us a little bit of information regarding your background and what you do for Microsoft?
Sure, of course. I think you did a good job there, Luke.
Thanks. It's always good to get that bit done well.
No, very good. So I've been at Microsoft for just over a year now. Prior to that, I was with an SI for about 12 years. And over the last 8 years, as you say, a big focus for my role has been around energy and utilities. So I think the topic that we're talking about today has become ever more of a focus, particularly in that industry. And as you talk about regulated industries, big topic. So yeah, pleasure to talk about it today. And I think even more so, Microsoft, we'll talk about how we're investing as an organization around sustainability, but it's been at the heart of our focus, nearly for the last 10 years. But I think as society, it's at the forefront of minds now. It's a real topic that people are coming to talk to us at the moment around how do they bridge that gap between their sustainability strategy and their digital transformation, and how can they bridge the two?
Yeah, it's becoming such a pertinent issue across almost every walk of life, if not every walk of life, isn't it? So I'm just going to start out today's conversation with a few stats around how and why businesses should become more sustainable. So 70% of companies now have a formal governance of sustainability in place. According to Forbes, 88% of consumers want their suppliers to help them make a difference and create a greener society. It's predicted that carbon dioxide in our atmosphere in 2021 will reach levels 50% higher than before the Industrial Revolution, which is a crazy stat in itself. We know that businesses are tasked with becoming more sustainable businesses, with better educating their customers to become more sustainable, and with working towards becoming carbon net zero. To get us started, what would be your sort of summary of the current issue, and what are the main challenges that you see the businesses you're working with, what are they facing?
Yeah, sure. So if I think about, I suppose climate change, it's been a buzzword for the last, as we said, 10 years or so. We knew it was coming, but I think everyone always thinks it's another 10 years out and it's not something that's our problem, something that we need to worry about. And I think if anything, maybe even in the last year with COVID and the way that the world's had to react and pull in together, I think it's been more than ever prevalent that actually the time is now, without sounding too dramatic. If we don't do something now, we don't have forever to act. And I think it does take all of us. Microsoft have been investing heavily in the last few years around this and how technologies can enable our customers and support them on their ambition. But we can't do it alone, and it needs everyone to pull forward. And I think what we're seeing is really aggressive targets now that I think everyone has been sitting around a little bit longer than we should have on our strategies as opposed to action. And I think it's time that people are looking at internally themselves at their organizations, setting those targets and looking at how do we accelerate against them. And I think if you look at our own government, so Boris Johnson made couple of months ago some clear statements around, our green agenda as a UK, and really saying the only way we're going to get there is to invest in digital technologies. And I think, it's great for us to hear that they're seeing it as a top priority, and there's investment there to be used. But I think what we're seeing is, businesses are now being faced with the how, and how do they get there. But I do think the mentality is there. I think if there's ever been a time, businesses have been forced over the last year to realise that they are good at change. They can change quickly. And so hopefully culturally the mindset's there for the time being.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Just on those challenges and those changes, what are companies doing to meet those challenges and to make those changes?
No, sure. So I think where we're seeing there's probably 5 areas that business are focusing on, and I think that like all businesses, I think that those particular areas. So you look at the operations, what can they do around their own operations and how they can. What we'll look at is in a second around what digital technologies can they apply to what they do today, but to accelerate those against their sustainable strategies. So you've got the operations side, the products and services. So what they do today, how they make those products, their supply chain, how can they make that supply chain more sustainable? They've got the customers side of the business. So how do they make sure for their customers and using partners that they are, I suppose, achieving what the customer's expectation are around being a sustainable business, but also leveraging their customers to help them. So it's the two-way exchange in terms of those green values. And policy, I think, is really important for them. How can we work together, as you talked about regulated industries? How can we work together with the regulator? We'll talk about that a bit more later. And then I think that it's where really the core is around the employees. That's going to be the core, as we said, about any company. How can we help the employees, I suppose, that feeling of, what can they do to become more green and feel that it's embedded in the culture of an organisation? And that's really going to help them. And I think, where we're focused on is around those technologies that companies can adopt. So we're talking about kind of this remote first. That really will help. You think about that workforce transition, that's going to help that carbon footprint instantly. And I think, again, it goes back to this year that has been, it's been tough for everyone, but at the same time, we've learned a lot, and we've learned that people can be productive, if not more, we've seen at home. And at the same time, saving incredibly from a carbon footprint. And that's not to say we're never going to travel back into the office. We want to be, and we miss that human contact. But from a reduction standpoint, I think it would have taken us a lot longer had we not had this year.
Absolutely. I think it's definitely sped up change in many senses.
Definitely. So I think that's one example, and we've got lots others that we can talk about, throughout today. But I think really it's applying those 5 pillars and looking at the technologies that we can really relate to. And we've got some great customer examples that are already adopting those. I think collaboration tools, we're using Zoom today, we use Teams, there's lots of collaboration tools that people have just adopted, and now it's become a normal way of working, and that will tie into sustainability strategies equally.
Okay, so Microsoft have stayed carbon neutral since 2012, and you're actively reducing your footprint by evolving the way you operate. What are the things that you're doing to achieve carbon neutrality?
Yeah, and I think it's such, like I said earlier, it's such a broad topic. I mean, we've just released, and I would, if you've got some spare time, our sustainability strategy that is fantastic, but I think it is 96 pages. So it is, when you've got some time, some light reading. But in terms of priorities, and I think lots of organisations, we talk about that path to net zero and what we're doing. There's 4 environmental priorities that companies should be looking at and focusing on. I think we focus on carbon a lot, which is top of mind, and that is around kind of emitting and reducing kind of all greenhouse gases that as an organisation we produce. So if I start with that one, for instance, we're looking at powering all our data centres with renewable energy, and I think a lot of tech companies are going that way or are very much there. So how can we make sure everything that we're touching is powered with renewable energy? But it doesn't just stop there. I think we need to be the co-innovation piece around that carbon negative piece. How can we do more? Would we ever think that we'd be helping to look at how do we build carbon capture and actually sucking carbon out of the air? It sounds kind of something Doctor Who like, but it's really, and that's what we're doing. And then we're working on those projects that really do look at every area that we could look at cities, smart cities, or areas that we can really reduce and make areas of this country carbon neutral rather than just looking at ourselves. So the carbon piece is one. The other area is water. Water is a huge area. So for us, it's becoming water positive. So making sure any of the water used, we should be giving back more. And that's not just within, again, our own what we're doing, but it's around how do we fund those projects. So, funding water projects, making sure that there's accessibility to safe water. Those things are really key and at our heart, and working with a lot of the water utilities, that's top of mind for them too. And so pulling in some of the things that we've got around predictive maintenance and leakage, and those things are going to be key to making sure that they can achieve those goals, and we can support them with that. And then thirdly is around zero waste. So again, looking at that, I think it would be tough to say that we 100% won't be able to put anything in landfill, but it should be around 90. I think we should be looking at where can we recycle it, or everything as possible, reuse. So our ambition around our Surface devices, for instance, is to be recyclable by 2030, completely 100%.
Wow.
So yeah, that's a big ambition of ours. And then finally is around the ecosystem, and that really is around the environment, and being very conscious around the planet. We can talk about that a bit more around what we're doing around AI, and that's really a big area that I think we've done a lot to date, but I think this will be a real growth area for us to make sure that we're outwardly conscious.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to unpacking that bit. Something that particularly fascinates me. So all those initiatives that you've outlined are fascinating, truly fascinating. But what I'm interested to know is how can companies replicate those efforts to achieve a similar goal?
No, sure. So where we're seeing, I think, the people that are able to achieve similar goals is again, we spoke about earlier, is managing to pull together. A lot of the companies we're talking to have really bold digital strategies, and that's fantastic. And that's been on the agenda for both CEOs for a while, but actually it's tying it in to the ambitions around their sustainability strategy. And some maybe quite, early days in kind of producing that sustainability strategy. We definitely help them with that. But there's definitely some quick wins that we can, so where our focus is around those tangible business outcomes. So where can we focus? And that comes right from the beginning of working with organizations to say, what do you want to achieve? What are you trying to achieve for your customers? How can we help you think big? So it's those bold ambitions at the beginning. So not just, we're going to do a little bit here and a little bit. We need to really, as a planet, to reach these goals, people need to be stretching in terms of
setting the bar high.
Exactly, really setting that bar high, and then tying back to how can those technologies excel and push, the co-innovation is there. So I think there's a couple of things we would say is these organizations, it has to be permeated through the organization. So it has to come top down, and we're seeing more and more the role of a sustainability lead is now coming at board level. So I think it's really important, where we used to see, say, the CMO and CDO, those types of roles, over the last few years have become board level. I think, we'll see the same with, the Chief Sustainability Officer and roles like that. So really started to drive it. And I think, we talked about our environmental priorities. They'll fit in under the 5 kind of business pillars, and how we can add really those digital technologies around that. And that's how businesses will be able to replicate the same goals. So how can they look at kind of assets and intelligence around those assets and start to get the most out of that? And we touched on kind of predictive maintenance, for instance. We're working, I think, with Anglian at the moment, looking at Anglian Water, looking at kind of reducing leakage. And I'm sure a number of other water companies were doing the same with. That has been top of mind for years, but I think more so than ever, it's not just from a customer perspective now or a regulator, it's around, the environment, and sustainability is also a key driver.
Yeah.
So there's a number of areas I would say, you know, going from workforce transition through to kind of the data piece. The data is core, and then going around into the assets and the intelligence, and into also going into the workplace, you know, that supply chain piece. How can we get clever there? So I suppose the main takeaway is, how can we work together with you, working backwards from your strategy, and looking at those tangible business outcomes from now. You know, we can start doing it. They're now, they're not in a 10-year time.
Of course, no, absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to move slightly more into the present day.
Sure.
Microsoft have made a commitment to be carbon negative by 2030. By 2050, you aim to remove all of the carbon that Microsoft have previously emitted, either directly or by electrical consumption, since the company was founded in 1975. Setting the bar high, as we said. Absolutely, that's brilliant. It's really good. I'm sure that there are many representatives of energy, utilities and financial services companies on the call today who are looking to achieve a similar goal within their business. What can companies within regulated industries do today to instill digital processes within their business that achieve better levels of sustainability?
So I think what we're seeing more so is the core is from a data perspective, so understand your impact first. So there's two sides to this question, I suppose. We can look at it from a regulatory, but I think first of all, it's really understanding your impact as an organisation. So the data is key. There's no point going out and having a wishy-washy kind of strategy there. You've got to say what you're going to do and stand by it, and customers will be looking for that. And likewise, as you say, the regulators. So understanding your data today, understanding what impact you can make and how you're going to measure it. And I think that's been a learning of Microsoft. We've made some bold ambitions and some statements, but actually it's not that easy. So the measurement piece and proving back, you know, how you can make something, but the how is hard. So, you know, some areas that we can help with, and we've been doing, is kind of the sustainability calculator. So, you know, we've got tools that people can use and we can help build, is around, you know, actually being able to calculate your own carbon emissions. And there'll be other tools in the market, but it's actually how are you going to measure that impact? I think another area that we've is that learning and constantly improving, because no one's got the answer. This is new for everybody, and there's lots of experts out there, and I think it's stopping. We can't be inward looking. We've got to be able to be sharing this to achieve that common goal, and that isn't just in our own sector. We've got to become cross-sector and learning across to achieve what we're setting out to do. So again, that collaboration piece is key. And you mentioned from a regulatory standpoint, and I think that's quite interesting in itself, because I think a lot of the organisations that you work with and that probably be listening today are used to having, you know, set metrics by the regulator, and also penalties as such if not meeting those. So I think it's an opportunity for organisations to shine, to say, yeah, we're going to do this, but start saying, you know, we know we have to do those things, but also see an opportunity to be best in class here, because there really is, and there's lots of ways to do it. I think a lot of the organisations are starting to. It's just how can we help that acceleration piece? And I think it's just being bolder around kind of going back to the regulator and saying, we're going to do this. And how, and sharing that, but also an opportunity more than ever is to influence these policies. And I think that's a big change, is how can we, you know, Microsoft is sitting on a lot of boards starting to support, but everyone's got a part to play. How can we start influencing these policies and supporting the regulator, and supporting everyone to kind of, as you said earlier, Luke, raise the bar, which alerts that. So that's the way.
Great. One thing, I'm just going to go back to something that you mentioned earlier around AI. As I said, something I'm particularly fascinated in. So how can companies use AI and Azure to manage their business in a way that protects communities, biodiversity and the planet?
Yeah, sure. So in April, so we announced our goals, but in particular to protect so we looked at protecting ecosystems. And so what we're doing, which sounds a big feat, but we're going to build and deploy and accelerate what we're calling our planetary computer. So this is through our AI for Earth. And if you haven't seen this program, I'd say go online, because this is probably the one that people love watching. You know, some fantastic videos to start understanding how we truly are doing things to protect the environment. And you know, it's not just about the humans on this planet. It is around, we're a small part, actually. If we don't protect, as we know, the whole Earth, then it's a bit of a wasted time just looking inwards at ourselves. So we're looking at a $50 million 5-year program that promotes the use of big data and technology to monitor and model and manage the natural world. So it is incredible. I get very passionate when we talk about this, because we're working with the likes of SSE, for instance. SSE Renewables are a big advocate of this technology, and really one that are kind of wanting to drive is look at pushing the boundaries of it and looking at new opportunities that they can use it. So their Chief Sustainability Officer, Rachel McEwen, she's really seen the opportunity around AI and species monitoring. So for instance, and there'll be more coming out in the next few months, but looking at renewable energy is one side, but the impact of renewable energy on the environment we also have to consider. So they're looking at ways of how can we monitor natural habitat and species to make sure that whilst we're building this renewable energy, that their habitat isn't impacted in any way either, and actually that we are building and their future is also sustained. So there's some fantastic work going into making sure that as an ecosystem we're always looking and protecting.
Yeah, that is fascinating. Love that.
We'll have to do another one on that in the future when we can talk a bit more around what we're doing there. But I would again encourage organisations to talk to us around, and this is where it goes back to, sorry, a little bit around the use cases. Every organisation will have their individual use cases and outcomes that we can work with, and yeah, very excited around that area.
Great. So again, moving on to the future. We've been in the now, we're going to the future. I'm just keen to understand what you think that the future of sustainability is, and what Microsoft are doing to help businesses become more sustainable, and what you're doing internally to really achieve that goal, or the previous goals that, the bar that's set high. What are you doing to achieve that?
No, I think it's a good question. So we talked a little bit about earlier around kind of that co-innovation piece and the investment in renewable energy. That is key, and I think we will be broadening that out, really looking at every touch point around, whether it's smart cities, new ways of producing renewable energy. And I think it's not just producing renewable energy. How do we make that accessible for everyone, and reaching places in the world that previously haven't had that access? So I think that's a big top of mind. But if we're taking it back a little bit in terms of home and how we support ourselves and businesses around that transition and the future and how we're going to get there, and we're already in 2021, we're saying we've got big ambitions by 2030. It's got to happen very quickly. I think the biggest gap or biggest area that we need to focus on, one of them is skills, digital skills. So while there's lots of rising talent, how do we also make sure that the fantastic people that we've got in the workforce today are also upskilled as well? So I'd say that's where a huge amount of investment's coming from the likes of Microsoft and other organisations, that we feel quite lucky that we have all this access to that training and learning, but actually it's seeing how do we get that into other organisations and get them skilled up quickly and get those programs rolled out. And I think it's interesting to see there is a lot of appetite from organisations that you may think traditionally may be a bit adverse to this big change. Actually, it's a fantastic opportunity for them to gain a new skill, maybe earlier on in a career that they didn't expect. So I'd say that for me is probably the biggest area, and along with data. I know we talk about data a lot, but that open data piece will be quite key, which is uncomfortable for people, but actually to be able to share data amongst other organisations will help everyone achieve those goals that we've all kind of trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think people are slightly dubious around it, but it's got huge benefits. Yeah. Okay, that's great. So it's no secret that customers expect their suppliers to be more sustainable businesses. They want us to better educate them in how to be more sustainable, and they want us to continually endeavour to provide services that are designed with sustainability in mind nowadays. How can our listeners align their sustainability goals to meet their customers' expectations?
Good question. I think no, it is. I think and sometimes it comes across almost a bit fluffy, but actually, I think what we're seeing more and more is authenticity and integrity. I had wonderful quote from a CIO recently, and he talked about their sustainability officer as being the DNA of their company. And I just thought, actually, if you've got that DNA in your company, that disseminates through the organization and out to your customers because you truly believe it. And I think customers are going to be looking both at that authenticity back into the values and whether they trust that brand. And it will tie back to, as we talked about earlier, when you're looking at the metrics that you're going to sign up to as an organization and you're going to outwardly commit to, customers will be looking at whether you are reaching those, committing those, abiding by those, and how you're going to achieve them. And I think more and more there'll be, people are becoming informed buyers. They want to know what their organizations, what they, whoever they're using, whether it's a utility company, whether it's shopping, whatever they're doing, they want to know, the values that sit behind that and that are tied to real metrics.
Great. So in light of that, what can digital professionals do to drive cultural change inside and outside of their organizations?
That's it. Yeah. Again, it's just, so we're seeing a number, and we're learning all the time as well as an organization. So, I mean, we've recently been working with Dyson, and they've got a fantastic, real strong program around, setting that example across their business with sustainability champions. So they're not people that it wouldn't be naturally part of their role, but they want to kind of fly the flag for sustainability and take ownership of some of those metrics, but really start educating internally. And I think that's where it comes from. It's how do you get those digital professionals also seeing the bridge between that and their sustainability goals as an organization. So that sustainability champions, I thought was really fantastic from those. And so we're seeing it more and more in Microsoft that we're adopting that. Really great forums around sustainability. It's something that people want to be part of, and want to be able to have that conversation. And I think again, it's driven top down. I think Sarah Bentley, that's recently joined Thames Water, she's really seeing that, and seeing it from the inside around the digital skills, but outwardly, what does that mean to the customers? So she's bridging the gap between digital and sustainability. So again, it's that top down approach that I think we're seeing that cultural change happen.
Absolutely. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, so something that we ask every person that we interview in this series is 3 takeaways that people can that can take away and implement into their business to make them more sustainable, to make them more successful. What would be your 3 recommendations to a company or to someone listening today?
Sure. So I think going back on what we've said today, I think the main ones would be think big and go beyond that. We really need these big ideas, and we need everyone to be listened. So that innovation pool, listen to your customers, listen to your employees, and really start taking those ideas and driving those ideas. I think the other one is make sure you can measure your impact. These statements are bold statements, but how are you going to measure what you're doing? And that the data piece will be really key there. And then I think finally, this isn't just a strategy and it goes in a drawer. This is truly going to be a cultural transformation. So really making sure that all parts of your organisation are on board and are feeling part of it. So I think those are 3 takeaways for me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Sarah, do you have any questions that have been submitted by today's participants?
Yeah, I think, Luke, maybe we've got time for one quick one because I know we've got to finish at 10:30. So just a quick one here. What are the first steps you can take towards becoming digitally sustainable? Is there a way I can better understand my current processes and what I can do to improve things?
So in terms of, I think again, it goes back to that data piece. So we work alongside organisations to strip back around I mean, there are simple tools like the sustainability calculator. They could go online and have a look at what they currently do today, and look at ways to improve that carbon footprint. But I think where it's best is really looking at what they're trying to achieve and looking at how do we tie those kind of outcomes, those business-led outcomes to it. And so probably something, without knowing the business, I can't answer quite as such, but in terms of applying, a lot of kind of the digital tooling is there, it's ready to be adopted. It's around how do you tie that to the cultural piece as well. But we can, I think that's one for, do reach out to us and we can support you with that one.
Brilliant. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of just having that conversation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, thank you, Danny. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been a fascinating conversation, one I'm particularly interested in. So it's been great for me to speak to you half an hour about it.
Thanks.
And thanks for joining us today, the people that are on the call. This will be going out in a couple of days as a recording on demand. So you'll have it available to you in your email inbox to catch up. So thank you very much for joining us.